The American Dream, where hard work gets you a house in the suburbs, a new car, 2 kids, 2 vacations a year, with a comfortable retirement just around the corner. A dream that has been used as the beacon of hope for almost a century. And yet, for the first time in recent history, the top 1% of American earners now control more wealth than the nation's entire middle class. And the chance to out-earn your parents has fallen by over 40%. Which begs the question, why is the American dream no longer affordable? The principle of the American dream has been the cornerstone of the nation's ideology since the Founding Fathers. However, it was only first discussed within the last century, at an attempt to show that life was more than just a material basis of existence. First coined by Pulitzer Prize-winning historian James Truslow Adams in his 1931 book, The Epic of America, Truslow stated, "It's not a dream of motor cars and high wages merely, but a dream of social order in which each man and each woman shall be able to attain the fullest stature of which they are innately capable, and be recognized by others for what they are, regardless of the fortuitous circumstances of birth or position." The Epic of America was his attempt as a way to combat the greed and prioritization of material items that was popularized throughout the Roaring Twenties, as he believed this was going to be the downfall of America. As the now-defined beacon of hope spread throughout the nation, accompanied with leadership of Franklin D. Roosevelt and the New Deal, Americans began to believe there was indeed a future ahead. There was only one issue: that public opinion, personal liberty, and a true sense of democracy is very dangerous for those starving for power. So they had to find a way to manufacture a new dream. In the 1996 book, PR, written by distinguished professor and author Stuart Ewan, he recounts that during the 1930s, the US-based National Association of Manufacturers enlisted a team of advertisers, marketers, and psychologists to formulate a strategy to counter government efforts to plan and manage the economy in the wake of the Depression. They proposed a massive ongoing ad campaign to equate consumerism with the American way. Americans were to be referred to in the public discourse as consumers, and were to be reminded at every opportunity of their duty to contribute to the economy by purchasing factory-made products, as directed by increasingly sophisticated and ubiquitous advertising cues.
This work begins with keeping our economy growing, and I encourage you all to go shopping more.
This shift in advertisements and pull to consumers was greatly attributed to Edward Bernays' use of propaganda. Nephew of Sigmund Freud, Austrian neurologist and founder of psychoanalysis, Edward Bernays was most popularly known as the father of propaganda. Using what he learned from his uncle and mother, another known psychoanalyst, he began to form a way to engineer consent, to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing about it.
What I call the engineering of consent, based on Thomas Jefferson's principle that in a democratic society, everything depends on the consent of the people.
Bernays believed the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Bernays' clients ranged from General Electric, Procter & Gamble, the American Tobacco Company, CBS, and was even responsible for Calvin Coolidge winning the presidential election in 1924, as well as the American breakfast of bacon and eggs. Bernays famously stated, "A highly educated class of opinion-molding tacticians is continuously at work, adjusting the mental scenery from which the public mind, with its limited intellect, derives its opinions." This view was also shared with Walter Lippmann, known as the father of American journalism. In his 1922 book, Public Opinion, Lippmann donned the term manufactured consent, discussing that ordinary citizens can no longer judge public issues rationally, since the speed and condensation required in the mass media tend to produce slogans rather than interpretations, and that the media directed the public's opinion to serve their own interests rather than inform, as the individuals would make decisions based on bias rather than reason. In his 1925 book, The Phantom Public, he then speaks out against democracy, stating that the public must be put in its place so that it may exercise its own powers, but no less, and perhaps even more, so that each of us may live free from the trampling and roar of the bewildered herd. Despite the economic hardships of the Great Depression, this shift towards engineering and manufacturing consent, with the help of propaganda, was once again quickly changing the American dream to that of a material one. As more Americans were gathered around the radio, hoping for a new update on the economy with the fireside chats given by Franklin D. Roosevelt, more than 90% of radio stations were now broadcasting commercials.
Unemployment remains a serious problem. Snap, crackle, pop, Rice Krispies.
Soap operas over the radio provided role models of real-life families who overcame adversity and successfully attained the American dream of middle-class well-being and happiness. These soap operas were even written with the sole intention of what the show could advertise in terms of merchandise. The 30s started the real push towards advertisements surrounding gender and societal roles, as women accounted for 75 to 85% of consumer spending in the 30s. And as propaganda, the very tool that altered American culture was now being weaponized by Joseph Goebbels and the Nazi Party, the United States now entered World War II, ending the Great Depression. Following World War II, the United States entered a period of remarkable economic growth, often referred to as the golden age of capitalism. With the substantial increase in manufacturing, real wages had increased by 50% from 1939, and as the United States had been rationing due to aiding in the war efforts, Americans were faced with pent-up consumer demand and increased savings. Public opinion held that veterans should not return jobless to a country without opportunity and education, resulting in the GI Bill. With a unified outlook of the future, this laid a foundation for a new period of comfort and economic prosperity, also paving way to the largest generation in American history, the baby boomers. A key reason for this economic boom was due to the fact that the government was actually decreasing spending, as it had been providing stimulus not only to the Great Depression, but also the war efforts. And what this allowed was for private investment to now go in and rebuild their businesses and begin to expand outside of city limits. This expansion came at the same time the United States was experiencing a substantial housing boom, creating enough supply to have homes for the returning soldiers, as well as recouping the losses from the Great Depression. As restrictive zoning, higher cost, and unions made inner-city development far more difficult, expansion went outside of the city, resulting in factory workers as well as veterans forming a robust middle class in the American suburb.
The homeowners charter, which you signed, says the grass is supposed to be 2 inches, and according to my measuring stick, yours is 2.5.
The American dream now abandoned the beacon of hope and replaced it with a white picket fence in the front yard to signal to others that they were the typical American family. The median home price in 1950 was $7,354, or roughly $71,350 today. And as housing was only 22% of their monthly budget, this led to disposable income and rampant consumerism, resulting in a consumerist trend far different than today. The main mission was to just fit in, to look exactly like your neighbor. It was even looked down upon if you had more than one car, as you were now seen as overly wealthy. American economist Victor Lebow would epitomize the new status quo. Our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction and our ego satisfaction in consumption. We need things consumed, burned up, worn out, replaced and discarded at an ever-increasing rate. And they had a new revolutionary tool to make that happen. As the television now allowed engineered and manufactured consent into the homes in a way that the radio and newspaper never could, public opinion really began to shift, as a 1-minute commercial could now be seen by roughly 160 million Americans.
Great Caesar's ghost. What's holding him up? You know I can't work without a good breakfast.
Chief, Jimmy's bringing a box of Kellogg's Sugar Smacks.
All the more reason for hurrying.
Sunbeam, you'll find her picture at every grocer's on Sunbeam bread.
Scotty's new Magic Oval Box. Only Scotty's give you tissues that float up gently, one at a time, and come out in neat handfuls, too, because there's a Magic Oval inside every new Scotty's box.
Approximately 8,000 U.S. households had television sets by 1946. 45.7 million had them by 1960. This not only shifted the way advertisements were done, but completely altered politics, as Americans were now able to see the cool, calm, and collected JFK compared to the sickly Richard Nixon.
I think Mr. Nixon is an effective leader of his party. I hope he would grant me the same. The question before us is, which point of view and which party do we want to lead the United States?
What was unique about this immense push to material belongings was that hard work actually did get you the new founded American dream, if not more. As the demand for domestic manufacturing increased in an attempt to maintain consumer demand, the American worker also did not have to compete with foreign labor, as they were facing severe catastrophe from the war. This not only put the power into the American workers' hands, but also allowed for further monetary expansion throughout the nation. To explore the difference in economic opportunity from the 50s compared to today, the 1950s minimum wage worker could pay a month's worth of rent for less than a week and a half of full-time work, or go catch a Disney Cinderella for just over a half an hour of labor. In 1956, when minimum wage reached $1, or $11.72 when adjusted for inflation, that was enough to support a two-person family over the poverty line. Today, the federal minimum wage stands at $7.25, roughly $500 more than the poverty line. As economic prosperity caused peace and comfort to be more readily available for Americans, it became more apparent than ever before that that wasn't the case for all Americans. And what was typically considered to be the silent crowd, they now had a real push for democratization, and was louder than ever before.
True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It understands that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. And I have fought now too long and too hard against segregated public accommodations to end up at this point in my life segregating my moral concern. Stand in this convention knowing that on some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And on some positions, it is necessary for the moral individual to take a stand that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because it is right.
And once again, here lies the issue, that public opinion, personal liberty, and a true sense of democratization is dangerous for those starving for power, so they now needed to punish those for revolting. The decades following the 60s really allows us to see how we got to this point today. During 1971, Justice Lewis Powell wrote the Attack on the American Free Enterprise System, otherwise known as the Powell Memorandum. Powell stated that no thoughtful person can question that the American economic system is under broad attack, as Powell saw bright young men from campuses across the country who were seeking opportunities to change a system which they have been taught to distrust, if not, indeed despise. They sought these opportunities to challenge free market ideology through employment in the centers of the real power and influence in our country, namely the news media, in government, as staff and consultants, in elective politics, as lecturers and writers, and as faculties of educational institutions. Bright young men remaining in key positions of influence where they would mold public opinion and shape governmental actions, ending up in regulatory agencies or governmental departments with large authority over the business system they did not believe in. And Powell's idea to combat this was to increase the free enterprise's use of public relations.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
As it was passed, political scientists Jacob S. Hacker and Paul Pearson wrote, "The organizational counterattack of business in the 1970s was swift and sweeping, a domestic version of shock and awe. The number of corporations with public affairs offices in Washington grew from 100 in 1968 to over 500 in 1978. In 1971, only 175 firms had registered lobbyists in Washington, but by 1982, nearly 2,500 did. The number of corporate PACs increased from 300 in 1976 to over 1,200 by the middle of 1980. On every dimension of corporate political activity, the numbers reveal a dramatic, rapid mobilization of business resources in the mid-1970s. Also occurring in 1971, Nixon removed the United States from the gold standard to address the international dilemma of a looming gold run and the domestic problem of inflation.
The effect of this action, in other words, will be to stabilize the dollar.
Hey, pal, you just blowing from stupid town?
Since that decision, the United States dollar has lost over 90% of its purchasing power. Due to high budget deficits, lower interest rates, an oil embargo, and the collapse of managed currency rates, stagflation dominated the 70s, and the 80s now saw the highest decade of interest rates, dampening the ability for Americans to afford the white picket fence symbolized in the American dream.
The only houses I have in your price range are in the neighborhood colorfully referred to as the rat's nest.
Coupled with Reaganomics, where cutting corporate taxes, deregulating businesses, investing in the use of private contracts, and decreasing spending in social welfare would allow corporations to become more profitable, and the trickle-down effect would increase wages and the overall economic prosperity of the American worker, cutting those in the highest tax bracket from 70% to 50%, and the highest capital gains tax from 28% to 20%. As the trickle-down effect has been argued for its effectiveness, inflation-adjusted wages have increased by 18 cents in the last half a century. With help from the Clinton administration, the economy once again saw a massive boom, with a record amount of jobs created. A surge of investments towards startups, and the internet appeared to be off to another decade of economic prosperity. In 1997, Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan described job insecurity as the reason the Federal Reserve didn't need to raise rates. Workers have been too worried about keeping their jobs to push for higher wages, and this has been sufficient to hold down inflation with the added restraint of higher interest rates. And by 2000, American workers now face the dot-com bubble, where Greenspan then lowered rates to historic lows, causing the demand for homes to increase to the point that lenders began to drastically reduce the requirements needed to purchase a home by targeting those that traditionally could not afford one, resulting in the widespread issuance of subprime mortgages, causing the worst financial collapse since the Great Depression, resulting in significantly lower construction rates than in previous decades when adjusted for population growth, leaving Americans to now face an affordable housing crisis, and the very thing that Truslow warned about all the way back in 1931, that Americans would struggle so hard to make a living that they would then forget what it meant to live. According to Raj Shetty, Ackman Professor of Public Economics at Harvard University, upward mobility is more challenging than ever before.
If you look back historically, say at the middle of the last century, kids born in the 1940s and 1950s, the American dream was well and alive at that point. If we look at the fraction of kids that went on to, say, earn more than their parents did, something like 90% of children born at that point in time went on to outdo their parents in terms of standards of living. But if we look at what has happened over time, we see a dramatic fading of the American dream, such that for children born in the middle of the 1980s and the 1990s, for entering the labor market today, it's now become a coin flip, a 50-50 shot as to whether you're going to do better than your parents.
All while navigating a form of media psychologically designed to engineer and manufacture consent like never before in history. As we begin to understand the thoughts and beliefs of these individuals that greatly shape the society that we live in today, and we begin to couple this with the corporate structures filled with greed, we begin to understand that the American dream has changed considerably from the very first time that it was discussed. Not to mention that freedom and democracy is continuously attacked in favor of the few. So in my opinion, the American dream may be harder to achieve than ever before. And largely, I believe it's due to the fact that it's just completely unaffordable. But I do believe that there is a whole nother factor of this dream that is absolutely worth fighting for. As I was beginning to conclude the research of this topic, I was being faced with the question, is the American dream still alive? And I was coming to the conclusion that I don't believe that it necessarily even matters. The American dream is merely a concept. It is a different definition and represents something different for each and every one of us. None of us have the same realization of what the American dream means. And I think in a lot of ways, that's perfectly fine. That is a true representation of freedom. I believe largely job opportunity, affordable housing, the pursuit of ownership with material items is a common theme, and I believe those to also be important. I believe that those should be a byproduct of a nation like the United States. But what we are continuously seeing is that consent is being manufactured and engineered for us to continuously remove control that we have in our lives. Many of us are living a life where we are just following a path laid out in front of us. We continuously pursue these material belongings as a representation of success. That when we achieve this, then we have fulfillment, we have self-worth, we have a representation of who we are and what it is that we're doing here on this earth. And each time we get it, we are continuously faced with the same realization. It is not fitting our needs. And so what we do is we continuously just move the goalposts further and further away. So what is the actual answer to this? Thomas Jefferson stated, "I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society, but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion. If once the people become inattentive to the public affairs, you and I and Congress and assemblies, judges and governors, shall all become wolves. It seems to be the law of our general nature, in spite of individual exceptions." As a nation, we continue to look for the next political candidate, the next right idea, the next revolutionary product, continuing to hear the same thing over and over again in the supposed betterment of the common individual, when in reality, we are continuously walking into the wolf's den. In my opinion, the way that we can actually begin to make a change is with unity. We are currently not a united nation. We are hardly even a neighborhood. And for a matter of fact, we can hardly look one another in the eye whenever we have a discussion, if we can even get to the point to where we have a discussion. How can change actually begin to happen when the frustration and injustice is taken out on your neighbor, on the older generation, the younger generation, your family, your friends, yourself? Then the powers that be. We all stand behind our beliefs without the slightest inclination to hear the other person speak, unaware that many of our beliefs were simply a result of decades worth of manufacturing. The society that we are living in is of economic instability. The reality that we are participating in has been so meticulously crafted, engineered, and manufactured to feel incredibly discouraging, to make us struggle so hard to make a living that individually we have completely forgotten what it means to live. But most importantly, we no longer feel that we can pursue what is best for the common good. We feel like we have no ability to fight for that because we can't even take care of these small things that are happening in our own lives. We are so desperate to escape this engineered reality with the plentiful of devices that the society is just quickly wanting to give to us, that it's making us feel like we have absolutely no control in our own lives. I personally believe that we absolutely do have control in our own lives. That's not me saying that I don't think it's incredibly difficult. That is not me giving an escape to the powers that be. But I think that we do have a tremendous amount of power in each and every one of us. I believe that we are individuals. We are human beings. We are not consumers. I believe that we are a community, not a bewildered herd. I believe that this nation is represented by the people, not the greed by the corporations. But I believe that if we continue to sell the beacon of hope and moral integrity for this circus where one is talking about their golf game, as crisis is literally right outside of our doors, then we are not only selling the illusion of democracy, the democracy that I still believe that we have, but we are completely shutting the door on the opportunity to ever begin to not only rebuild it, but to be able to have that be the way of life, to be able to have an actual betterment for society as a whole. There is much injustice and distress and greed not only plaguing the United States, but the world around. But there is still good worth fighting for. And the good continues to come from these small unnoticed actions from everyday individuals. It is not going to come from those that seek to rule, but from these small acts of kindness from neighbor to neighbor. Thank you guys so much for your time. I hope that this was able to provide a little bit of value, and I hope that there is some action that can come from this video. I will continue to keep doing my best each and every day, and I will continue to do the most in-depth and thorough research for these topics that I believe need to be discussed. I am still young. I am still naive. I am still unaware of a lot of different factors that are happening throughout the world, and I could use the value that these older individuals have to help me gain more insight of what it is that's happening. Thank you guys once again. Thank for your time. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.